Welcome to the Upshot, Ulti-World's podcast about everything in the disc golf world. I am your host, Josh Mansfield. Joining me once again, Dan Prentice. Dan, we're so happy to have you on for another show while Charlie is still enjoying his vacation, and thrilled to have you for another week.
Let's just have Charlie go on permanent vacation. Let's just, you and me, take over, Josh.
There we go. This is our show now.
No one would miss Charlie, right?
Man, Charlie is my rock, man. I just depend on Charlie.
I understand
this hosting stuff. I mean, I spent 5 minutes just trying to find how to turn the video quality up to a high level. Like, man, we need Charlie, that's for sure. We got a great show today. It's going to be an exciting one with a couple different topics. We're going to start by hitting a little bit of LVC, finalize that, wrap that one up before we move over, talk about the announcement from the Disc Golf Pro Tour regarding the championship format change, as well as the Player of the Year and other player awards change. And then we're going to hit some listener mail. So it's going to be a great show. Starting off, though, we're going to hit and chat a little bit about LVC. And this was inspired by a question in our rapid reacts that I kind of ran down really quickly, but I felt like deserved a little bit more attention. Earlier, about 3 weeks ago or so, Charlie and I, in part of our season preview, did a segment that we titled New Bag Who Dis, and went through and kind of looked at some of those players who changed manufacturers in the off season and made some predictions about what we needed to watch and how we thought their performance would be. Well, we now have some results. So we're going to go through and go down that list, a couple other players who maybe weren't included in that segment as well, talk about how they performed, and then kind of see, should we be worrying about them at this point, or do they exceed expectations? I think we've got a couple of cases there. So let's just start the list with, I think, the most obvious of the bag changes. Simon Lizotte. Simon finishes in 47th place, having a really rough final round. Dan, how much do you attribute this to the bag change? Are you worried about the new discs? And we also saw Simon at All-Stars, so
yeah,
we have a little bit more information on him than other players.
I attribute it absolutely zero to the new discs. I think if you were worried about the new discs, you saw everything you needed to not be. He played great at All-Stars. He played great, especially in that first round, but really he was very solid through the first 3 rounds at LVC. The concern with Simon's performance, I think, is health related. I don't think it has anything to do with the discs. I think the discs are just fine, which honestly is a little surprising to me. I thought we would see more disc struggles with him based on what we saw from him like early on in his YouTube videos about kind of adjusting to the bag. I'm not worried about that at all.
I saw a really interesting comment that said, when people's panic about Simon and his new bag, no other pro gives us the look and the authenticity that Simon does.
Yeah.
And so maybe every pro has that exact same struggle and feels the exact same way. They just don't put it on camera like Simon did. And so we panicked more about Simon than we did anybody else. I agree with you. The one thing and the big question that I have that's kind of lingering from the bag change. So final round, Simon throws 7 OB throws. And, Simon, we know I think he's ever since the injury been playing more conservative and I think just smarter golf. I don't know how much you can attribute 7 OB throws to an elbow injury, which is obviously what was bugging him, or if that maybe was the sign of the discs coming out and that maybe in the windy conditions as they were changing, that was something he wasn't as comfortable with. The biggest point, though, that I think with Simon, and it is most important here, is that a new bag, I think, can exacerbate a bad round due to other reasons. So, for example, the elbow injury means that if he is feeling uncomfortable anyways, then those new discs are not going to help it. So maybe there's a slight exacerbation, but like you said, played great at All-Stars, showed us early round performances that were super strong. And so overall, I'm not as worried about his bag as I am his health right now. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Next up, we've got Paige Shue, who finished in 40th and missed the cut. How much do you think this is another one that I just don't know if I can attribute to a bag change?
Yeah, this may ruin this whole segment early here, Josh, but I don't think you could. It feels early to attribute any kind of disc change. It's too small of a sample size for Paige Shue, I think. This also is just not a course that sets up well for her. It feels like a big distance course, and that's never been her game. When she won Worlds, she basically said, I won because I threw a putter off the tee every hole and, kept it in bounds and other players didn't. You can't win like that anymore. not on this course. So also she didn't play like pretty much all of last year. You know, I think it's very easy to just rust, you know, more than a bag change. So while there may be, you know, I didn't see enough to say, oh yeah, you know, it's not the discs. I think there's too many other factors that you could, you know, with any confidence say that the discs are a problem right now.
Agreed. So those are really our two finishers who were really finished outside of expectation. I mean, I don't, the Paige Shoe one is less surprising than the Simon one, but still, I think I would have expected Paige Shoe to make the cut. But again, rust, injury, I think two other alternatives. Let's then talk a little bit about who we feel like is kind of shining with this new bag relative to expectations. And, you know, you got to be thinking if you're their manufacturer, you're pretty pleased. Let's start with Anthony Barella. Finishes in 8th. Is on lead card. Shows some big flashes. Do you think Discraft leads this event feeling really optimistic, really thrilled about that performance? I mean, it looks like it wasn't a disc issue to me. I think it's just kind of classic Anthony Barella a little bit, though we had a little bit of dispute here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, does he not hit the Bushnell spotter if he's throwing a different, like he's still throwing Innova? That's the big question, I think, right? No, that's true. Yeah, I think this is exactly what you're looking for. Like, only one player wins a tournament, right? Yep. Anthony Barella spent a ton of time on lead card, throwing Discraft, throwing it really well for a lot of the weekend. I think the weekend, yes, he didn't finish well, and yeah, that feeds into the, you know, the narrative that we have around AB. But I think when you're a disc manufacturer, you just want players that are being high profile for the right reasons, and Anthony Barella was that for the vast majority of the weekend. So yeah, I think Discraft has to be very pleased. It also, you know, he was a pretty hyped up player in the off season. You know, as a player that I think a lot of people were picking as kind of a sleeper for having a breakout year. And I really don't think the performance would have done anything to dampen that. If anything, you know, I think you may have a little more optimism about it as a player who can be on those lead cards more often this year. So yeah, I think Discraft has to be pretty happy with how AB went this weekend.
Well, another player who they've got to be thrilled with, Holland Hanley.
Yeah.
Throwing, you know, 3rd place. It really feels like to me that Anthony Barella and Holland Hanley are two cases of players that really show and kind of help dispel the myth of, the new bag change, maybe you should be worried about them, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Barella, I mean, had a strong weekend, but Holland Hanley coming in 3rd place with the really strong final round, shooting the 10-16 rated. She's got to be thrilled. Discraft's got to be thrilled. I think that is just such an amazing move and is showing that this is going to pay dividends right from the get-go. That, I mean, that's got to be great for both of them. I don't know if this is a hot take, Josh, but I think maybe that, like, there's a reason that manufacturers pay players to throw their discs, right? Mm-hmm. It's because the players matter more than the discs. You know, as the saying goes, the archer matters more than the arrows. So, like, if you're a company, I think the key down the stretch, like, if you know, obviously it's really big to get a person like Paul, you know, who like transcends it. But I think for manufacturers, it's going to be about, can you hit a player like before they break out? Like, can you pick those players who are about to break out? So for that, like, it feels like AB and Holland, especially with like the really strong showing, feels like really good players to pick up for Discraft. They have to be ecstatic with both of these, I think. Because, I mean, people are still going to want to throw the discs of their favorite players, the exciting up-and-coming players. So just take advantage of that. I don't think the discs are really making that much of a difference for these players. But, you know, it looks good when your sponsored players are having big weekends. So, yeah. James Proctor is another player who I don't know if we even mentioned in the new Bag Who Dis segment, but he is now throwing, as we've discussed before, though, Thought Space Athletics and Infinite in his new sponsorship. Ends up taking 14th, and I think was a little bit we didn't talk too much about, and jumping 9 spots on final day 8 down to get up into 14th place. This is the kind of sponsorship that I think is a really interesting one, because Simon Lizotte and then the Paige Shoe, Barella, Holland Hanley, that's, you know, MVP, thanks to James Conrad, very well established brand. Maybe not one of like the largest tier per se, but very well established. You have then the Discraft brand that have represented the previous 3 that we've talked about, very well established, one of the largest brands in disc golf. Now you've got James Proctor, though, who's like, hey, I throw Thought Space, and he's finishing in the top 15. It's a player who I think is easy to write off when he's been throwing the same brand and is finishing in same places, but is now touring more and has the new opportunities. I think that gives him a fresh face. And tied for 14th, I think they've got to be happy with.
Yeah, and James is another player who kind of like kept popping up. Like he was on the stream a lot. He had a rough second round where he shot even, but I mean 8 down round 1, 7 down round 3, 8 down again round 4. So he just had that one off round. Otherwise, he probably finishes a lot higher. And yeah, that's a player I think you don't really think about. But for a smaller company like ThoughtSpace, just getting players that are up there on the live stream. And I think we're about to talk about Maria Oliva in a bit as well for them. So yeah, I mean another like smaller company that I think is trying to capitalize on players who might exceed expectations, and I don't think they can be anything but pretty happy with how James played, because he's never gonna be a player that's like pushing for wins. I mean, unless he has like a crazy weekend. So this kind of feels like, return of investment ceiling or getting close to that for ThoughtSpace.
Sure. Well, let me offer you a little bit of a counter argument here. If James had thrown, so the hot round in round 2 was 12 down, and there were a couple of those. Matt Bell threw a 12 down in final round as well. So those are on the same courses. If James Proctor had thrown an 8 down in round 2, which he's shown is pretty sustainable and is not anything spectacular. He goes 8 down, 7 down, 8 down, and shoots 33 under par, which is a winning score, right? Like he was one bad round away from being in contention, if not like outright having a chance to lead. And who knows, when he's on lead card, what's the pressure like? I mean, there are lots of the what if-isms that we can do.
Right.
But I think what stands out to me is just how sustainable it felt like James Proctor weekend was and how replicable it is. Like he really could do this again and again and be strong. At 1020 rated, I mean, he is a little bit lower on the rating side, but we've seen him pop up before, and I really liked what I saw out of James this weekend. So, but you mentioned Maria Oliva. So how do you feel about Maria's 12th place finish? Because I have thoughts that I'm going to share, but I want to hear yours before I say anything.
It felt kind of sneaky to me. Like it didn't, like, watching the live streams, it didn't really feel like we were seeing much Maria Oliva. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, she's like kind of up in the mix. Which I don't know. I feel like that's kind of different from last year, where I felt like we got to see her a lot. Like, she'd be on those lead cards kind of early in tournaments, and whether she finished in the top 10 or outside, it was a little less surprising. But yeah, I'm really curious to hear what your more extreme thoughts are here.
Yeah, this is my hot take of this the real hot take of this tournament. So Maria Oliva finished last season in 12th, and what's noteworthy, her worst finish is at 33rd at Jonesboro. But other than that, I think she only missed the top 20. She missed a couple times. So my feeling, I mean, this is Maria Oliva's advantage, right? When you look at her stats, Maria Oliva is a strong off the tee. So let me pull up player stats real fast, and let's check strokes gained tee to green. Hey, look at that. Maria Oliva was second at 17 under par. Okay. So really strong off the tee, and she was in negative strokes gained putting. It's not as spectacular as Henna and Evelina in terms of how bad the putting is, but neither is her driving ability. And I think that we are seeing really and here's the other part that's the big problem. Henna shot 10 OB strokes. Maria, 22.
Oof.
22 OB strokes. And if you look at her end of season performance last year, the end of season where it is more woods and natural OB, she suffers from that. She isn't as clean off the tee when you have OB, and LVC is not even the most punishing course in terms of artificial OB that we play on the season. I think she's going to play well at Jonesboro. I think she's going to have a real advantage there. I think she's going to really enjoy OTB Open. I don't know what this iteration will look like. Portland, I think, should go pretty well for her too. I don't think Maria is poised to be the star this season that a lot of people said, though. And I know that she had the strong kind of early season with the Shelley Sharp Memorial, with the win at the Challenge at Goat Hill, and those are good looks. But everything I'm seeing from Maria, at least in LVC and what we saw last season, is I just don't think she's going to be this breakout player that so many people really predicted from her this season.
That's fair. I think maybe, I don't know. I haven't seen as much of people calling for her breakout. But I'm not. It's not my job to be as in tune to what people are saying as you. Yeah. To me. I mean, and the only player who threw OB more than Maria at LVC was Haley King. So she's not exactly like in the worst company in the world by being up there, you know. But yeah, to me, Maria is. I feel like what we saw from Maria is last year, which she still had an impressive year. Kind of feels like her ceiling a little bit to me. Like, I kind of agree. I don't know that there's like this big potential waiting to be unlocked. I think she's kind of like a high ceiling, high floor player who will have pretty rough weekends sometimes, and weekends where she's throwing it great off the tee, and you know is kind of in the mix for finishing top 5. But yeah, I don't know that I see much, and she's still a young player, so like she still could find that next level. But yeah, I don't see like the latent potential, the latent obvious potential of her. Like, oh yeah, she's right there from taking the next step. I do agree with you on that.
Right. I've heard a lot of Maria Oliva hype.
Sure.
That I have been really hesitant to get anywhere near, and I just feel more validated in that. And so, I think Charlie had been hyping and was kind of excited about her too. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of I was like, yes, I'll argue with Charlie, but it's Dan, and Dan agrees with me. We'll shoot.
yeah. Sorry, you should have told me you get a heads up. I could have taken the Charlie approach.
Right. The last one that I wanted to talk about, though, and this one I think is really, really interesting. We have all of Lone Star. That was the title of our the section there. Deanne Carey misses the cut in FPO. She's one of the new players that they got. But Lisa Fakis finishes tied for 22nd, and this is definitely not Lisa Fakis's course.
No.
So I really like Lisa as a player and as a person, and I'm excited for her and hoping that she can perform a little bit better when we get to some other courses. This is not her strong suit, and we know that, and so it's hard to make a judgment call here. But man, if you're Lone Star, you've got to be thinking that you just did great on the MPO side. Mm-hmm. Nico ties for 17th, coming back off of his suspension. Hasn't played in 6-7 months? Anyway, however long. Hasn't played in months because of the suspension. Comes back, is able to finish inside the top 20. And we didn't even talk about this on the Rapid Reacts on this pod. Emerson Keith with a sneaky 8th place.
Yeah.
Like, jumps up and takes top 10. I have been easy to dismiss Emerson Keith when talking about Lone Star. I've really been focusing on Nico because I think he's the player that has the higher potential to, in terms of the return, but he's also the high profile player.
Right.
But man, like Emerson Keith, 25 down, like that's a great showing.
Yeah. And it's not that long ago that Emerson was doing this a little more regularly. Like he was 2019 Worlds where he was on lead card, I think like at least 2 of the 5 rounds. So, I mean, he's shown flashes. He's also one of those players that like other disc golfers talk about very highly. Like I feel like other disc golfers for a really long time have had all this respect for Emerson. And I know he's been like a young dad, so maybe the last few years, not been able to focus on touring quite as much, or not getting as much practice time in as he would like. So yeah, I think he is a sneaky pickup, a player who can pop up like this, finish top 10. Maybe even in push for a tournament too, especially in the Texas swing where he really excels a lot of the time. I will say I wouldn't be too worried about Deanne Carey yet. Her last 2 finishes at LVC, 25th last year and then 31st the year before. So it's not exactly her course either. So I still think Deanne Carey could be a nice pickup, and Lisa too. So yeah, the MPO gets like the flashy, promising finishes for LVC, but if I were Lone Star, I wouldn't be panicking about my signings of Lisa and Deanne just yet.
Agreed. For reference, Emerson Keith last year at LVC finished 74th.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, that's pretty bad.
74th to 8th. Yeah. I would love Statmando, guys, if you're listening. I'm curious to know, and I don't know if Emerson had injury or what have you, but I'm curious to know about the best increases in finishing places.
Ooh, yeah.
From worst to like from one year to next, and that biggest jump, because 74 to 8 is one of the highest I ever remember seeing.
Yeah, it's hard to get much bigger than that, really.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's almost the field.
Yeah.
Like, so big finish from Emerson Keith, and I'm excited to see him early season starting off strong. I mean, we expect good things from him at Texas Swing, but great start for Emerson Keith. So, I think all in all, though, a lot of these players, what proves the rule, right? The big summary: it's the archer, not the arrow.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of players who are already just kind of comfortable and sitting into it, and I think we've seen some surprising finishes where changing bags. Simon said it out loud and said it like most prominently that changing bags gives renewed and fresh motivation. And I wonder if there were players like James Proctor, like Holland Handley, like Emerson Keith, who feel that renewed sense of motivation by the bag change as well. And because of it, we're seeing just some great finishes from some of these players who've changed from their bags. So maybe the theory of like, oh, they just changed bags, we need to be worried, should actually be they just changed bags, maybe consider slotting them higher than where they actually finish.
Yeah, I think, I certainly don't have the mentality of a pro disc golfer, but I could see it being the kind of thing where like it forces you to get out of your kind of comfort zones as well too, kind of makes you like forces you to reanalyze all the shots in your bag, which I could see, being a really helpful thing for a lot of players too. So yeah, I think like the panic or concern about players taking a dip or having an adjustment period to a new bag is pretty much always overblown. And even when it maybe looks like a player is struggling to adjust a new bag, there's probably other factors that we just, don't know about. So,
well, we love to be a part of that overblown. So.
It's very fun, right? That's like why the off season is fun. It's fun to speculate about it.
That's right. So that's it for our coverage of LVC. If we missed anything, you have any thoughts, comments, please make sure to email us at old2roll.com. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that. We're now going to move some news that came out early this week, February 23rd. So late last week, my apologies, just before LVC. The Disc Golf Pro Tour has announced that they are going to have updates to the championship format as well as the end of season award criteria. So let's start with the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship format. Now, if you remember in years past, based on your seeding for MPO and FPO, then that is where it kind of determines what round you will buy to. And after each round, it resets your scores and you start fresh. And then the top so many get to move on in order to the next round until you get to the final four who compete in the finals at a 0 fresh slate. That has changed. It will be occurring at Nevin Park in Charlotte, North Carolina again. But it is going to be split into two round halves, or what they call it. And I think the best way to think of this is almost two completely independent tournaments of stroke play. The MPO field is going to stay at 32. The FPO field will expand to 24. But the way it'll work is you have the first two rounds, and instead of a bye, the MPO seed and FPO seeding will get strokes to their advantage. So on the MPO side, first place will have a 6 under par, second 5, third and fourth will get 4, 5 through 8 will get 3, 9 through 16 will get 2, 17 through 24 will get -1, and 25 through 32 will start at even. On the FPO side, it's the exact same bracket down to 9 through, so 1 is -5, 2 is -4, 3 and 4 is -3, 5 through 8 is -2, 9 through 12 is -1, and 13 through 20 will start at 0. The playing event is still going to take place as it did this last year. And so you have these kind of borrowed strokes. This is very similar to the PGA Tour Championship, where you get the borrowed strokes, and you go into the semifinals. After those 2 rounds of semifinals, they will take the top 12 in MPO, 8 in FPO, who advance to finals, where their scores start at even. They will play 2 rounds of stroke play. Cumulative lowest score wins. So essentially a 2-round tournament. Dan, what are your thoughts about this new format? I know a lot of people have been kind of critical of the Disc Golf Pro Tour format. They feel like it's kind of wonky. What do you think of this format? Do you feel like it addresses some of those concerns?
I would have to think it would address some of those concerns for people that had them. I kind of liked the old format. It was certainly unique, but so is like having a tournament to determine an overall champion for the season. Like that's just kind of a weird thing that doesn't really work for golf, really. I liked it. It led to some really cool moments that this like new format feels will be less likely. Like Josh, what is the coolest moment in the history of the Pro Tour Championship?
Is it Nathan Queen winning?
I think that would be a lot of people's answer, right? I think that would be a lot of people's answer, and this feels like it's less likely for that to happen. It feels like a much bigger reward to give people that stroke advantage, to get themselves into the finals. And then once you're in the finals, of course, it's even. I do like that it's even there. You maintain that, even footing once you've made it to the final round, but. Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be less fun. I think if you want something that like is more likely to reward the best players and have the best players win the championship more often than not, I think it's good for that. I think it will be less fun. You'll see less fun runs from surprises. It's kind of like, what's a better playoff format? The NCAA March Madness or the NBA playoffs?
Right.
NBA playoffs, hell of a lot better determining who the best team was. March Madness, hell of a lot more fun for upsets and excitement.
I think that's a great analysis. Now, Jeff Spring does mention one thing, and quoted in the article. You can go check this article out on LT World Disc Golf. Fans will now get to watch the best players in the world starting in round one, with each round continuing to bring consequential excitement. So I think the point there, right, is that people were disappointed that the likes of Paul McBeth didn't play till semifinals, and then lost in semifinals, and then Paul's out, right? And the draw of those fans that want to watch their favorite players when their favorite players aren't on the card is something detrimental on the fan level. I guess the one thing that I would contend with just a little bit, I think you're right about the fun versus the seriousness, right? And like determining who is the best player, and the Pro Tour champion. I think the value in kind of the standardization of this along the PGA Tour lines is that this is the flagship event in terms of money for the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Yeah. And if you're going to sign over a check for $35,000 or $50,000 eventually, or $100,000 eventually, you really want it to go like it went to Nathan Queen one year, and like, that's really cool. But then like Nathan Queen, like, you don't talk about him again much, right? It kind of disappears. I think when it's that much money is on the line, you want to see the best of the best players in that finals, battling it out, creating the kind of, and I think there is drama on the other sense, but with the kind of sponsorship and money, I understand the value of wanting to standardize it and remove a little bit of that randomness.
I will say, I think you probably hit a more accurate point with their reasoning, is that they want to get the more high profile players on the course more. I think that's 100% why you do it. You get more people to tune in, more people to go. Yeah, if you're guaranteed more rounds of Paul and Ricky, etc.
Right. Charlie usually has to be the business one who points out the practicalities of things. So I gotta do that in his stead, because I agree though. I think it's I'm gonna miss a little bit the kind of randomness. The biggest thing that I'm really excited to see though, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing, I struggle to get excited about this event when it comes a week after USDGC. Or 2 weeks after USDGC, right? When it feels like there is a major, the majors are finished, and then it's like done. You're like, oh, but psych, you actually have another one, right? And I think that the fun randomness of it detracted from my ability to be engaged in it as a serious tournament. And I think this might help alleviate that concern a little bit, and might make it feel a little bit more, because they always use Disc Golf Pro Tour and majors in the calculation. They're telling me that last year, for example, and we'll get to this a little bit, but last year, the player of the year, you winning the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, is as important as winning Worlds. It didn't feel that way. It never has. Yeah. And this may get it closer to the level of a major, quote unquote. And I think that's something that the Pro Tour also wants, and may help keep people engaged at the end of the season when they're feeling season fatigue.
You brought up the PDGA equivalent, and I am an uber casual when it comes to watching golf. I will only watch like pretty much the Masters and maybe like the US Open if it's like close on Sunday or something, or a player I've heard of is trying to win. But like, does anyone consider the PGA? The PGA, I think I said PDGA. I meant PGA.
I think you did. Yeah. I knew what you meant. Yeah.
Does anyone consider the PGA tour championship or whatever it's called, like on the level of the majors? I don't think so.
I couldn't tell you. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm like you. I mean, I am a casual golf fan, but not well enough to answer that question.
Yeah. So if you're like a fan of both, I would like to know. And I'm not saying like, I think maybe disc golf gets a little bit too much in like trying to find an equivalent for golf all the time, for its own self, when, disc golf should, probably be a little more experimental, don't do things that professional golf does. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't think the Tour Championship is ever going to be on that level. So, and yes, like I know it's a big amount of money. That's a valid point too. But maybe that brings up a bigger point that like you shouldn't be determining who wins that huge amount of money based on one tournament anyway. Maybe that should go to like just be determined by final standings,
point standings.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's a very fair point,
which is less dramatic, granted. But if you're more concerned about like the money going to the people who are fair, that's the ultimate way to make it fair.
That's true. That is true. Final thing on this article and on this announcement, the Disc Golf Pro Tour has changed their end of season awards a little bit. They will be including a new award, the Comeback Player of the Year. I think this is hi Simon, like this is the Simon Lizotte Award. Like, we gave Simon the Comeback Player of the Year award. Like we said that's what he should earn. But congratulations to Simon. He now has an award that is inspired by him. It says it's for individuals who returned from injury, had a resurgent year, or otherwise returned to prominence after a period away from disc golf.
You know what this really is, Josh?
What is this?
This is the Juliana Corver Award.
Yeah, right.
This is that we can't do the Rookie of the Year again like that.
Yeah. If Paige Shue wins at Worlds at and like 5 years later, same course, congratulations, Paige Shue, for Comeback Player of the Year. The other two changes, Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year now are going to be solely based on a 50-50 share of fan and media votes. Now, I want to just quickly give to you last year's method was 3 criteria equally weighted: average finish at majors and DGPT championship, DGPT points, and a media vote. The Rookie of the Year was the highest point total who had not played in more than 3 DGPT Elite Series National Tour or major tournaments in a single previous season. I think that is probably going to stay the case for the criteria to be eligible. And so like you can't vote for somebody who's not eligible, obviously, but now it's a 50-50 share of fan and media votes. Thoughts on this, Dan?
I don't feel strongly about it. I think it makes sense. Like I think if you have, these awards determined by things like rankings and finish, I think it kind of takes a lot of the subjectivity out of it. And maybe some people would say that's a good thing, but I mean, at the end of the day, like the whole Player of the Year thing is, I think, intended to be pretty subjective. It's like you're supposed to like remove like the stats from things and have eyeballs determine who the Player of the Year was. I think fan. This can be like very highly debated about the value of fan votes for things like All Stars and other pro sports. I think ultimately it's just fun, right? Like let the people have their say. I think you'll probably get. I like. Will it ever change who would have won Player of the Year? I think that's probably pretty unlikely, to be honest.
I have a contention that you're wrong on that last part.
Okay,
and this is why I hate this change.
Okay,
2 years ago, Missy Gannon wins Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Because she won 2 events at the end of the season, and people didn't want to vote for Paige. 2 years ago, it did have a fan vote. Missy won in what was just a slap in the face to Paige Pierce, right?
So what was the criteria then 2 years ago?
I don't know the full criteria, but I do know that it did involve the fan vote component.
Okay.
So Paige did not win. It went to Missy, who won I think it was the inaugural Throw Pink Women's Championship and then the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. Paige had a stretch. Remember, she had second at Jonesboro, goes to Hawaii, misses a couple events, comes back, and then wins OTB, US Women's, Masters Cup, Portland Open, and the Utah Open before taking second at Worlds. And then I think she had the win at Ledgestone, a win at Idlewild, a win at what is this one? MPC? DGPT MPC. I don't even know. Match play championship. That's what it is. So won that one. Not as huge of a deal. But anyway, I think that I didn't agree with that choice.
Well, so I want to know what the breakdown was for that. Like was it the player vote that swung it? Was it not? Was it tournaments not being weighted enough? Was there a media vote there for that as well?
I think it was 50-50 as well, like how it used to be, but I couldn't tell you. I don't remember it enough, and I couldn't find the article that was written about it. But I think the All-Stars weekend is a fun weekend that does not significantly, at the end of the day, matter, right? No one's printing discs that say first card All-Stars. So let them have, like, imagine, okay, let me give you, here's the counterfactual.
Okay.
Imagine if the NBA did a objective measurement for the All-Star game, but MVP for the season was fan vote.
What?
Right?
I mean, it would be silly, yes. I think because a lot of people have a problem with the way like NBA awards are given anyway, though. So that they might not be the best example. Yeah.
NFL MVP though, right?
Sure.
Right. Imagine if it was a fan vote. MVP is a real or Player of the Year is a award that holds weight. You get discs, commemorative discs when you win this award, and it's a point of sponsorship and endorsement. And for it to be a fan vote, I think it's misplaced. I really do.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I probably wouldn't do 50-50. Maybe give fan vote like 25% or something like that. So, I think that's fair. I think ultimately I just don't really care that much about it. And the disc thing is very valid. Like it does have real world repercussions for winning. And yeah, the Missy winning definitely was a head scratcher. I really would, if someone could point me in the direction of where to see what the criteria was for winning it that year, I would be curious. But yeah, you're probably right that the fan vote shouldn't be equally weighted to whoever makes up the voting media in this case.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of emails who emailed in about proposals for how they think the championship format should be done. Let us know your thoughts on the new format. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get to some mail.
The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. And there's a lot of top pros out there carrying a Pound bag. Check out the list of Pound ambassadors for 2023. Nate Sexton, Big Germ Jeremy Colling, Valerie Mondahano, Mason Ford, Christian Dietrich, Dustin Keegan, Zoe Andyke, Vanessa Van Dyken, Joel Freeman, Aaron Gossage, Ella Hansen, Gavin Babcock, Casey White, and Cole Redalin. An incredible group of pros who will almost certainly see some Elite Series wins out of this year, and they're all carrying a Pound bag. Get yours today at pounddiscgolf.com.
Welcome back to the Upshot. Before we get into our mailbag, Dan reminded me there is one other topic that we do need to chat about real quick, and that is the new PDGA logo. As we know, PDGA kind of did the rebrand. They've talked about the idea and a couple of the themes that go into it. But Dan, I just want to get your first impressions, though. What did you think of the new logo?
Meh. I think they made the right decision to make a new logo. I think it's definitely a very good decision to get away from making the male presenting player be the default logo of an organization that has both an MPO and FPO division. Because women's sports are too often othered, like it's women's sports and just sports when it's men's sports. So I think that's a good change for sure. The thing I don't like about it, if you see the logo and you don't know what the PDGA is, you have no idea what the PDGA is still. And I think that's the issue. I like just purely graphically, it looks fine. Like they keep the colors so it's somewhat identifiable that way. I do kind of like that. Like, you know, if you know the PDGA is a disc golf thing, you get kind of like, you know, an allusion to a disc in flight through the middle of the logo, which is kind of cool. But if you just see that logo slapped on somewhere, you have no idea what it is.
I think I agree with that. You know, at least in the old logo, like it showed like the basket and the disc and the putting, right? You know, they talk about like the profile of the flying disc, the horizon of the earth, the dawn of the new day, and like all that symbolism is good. But I also think that those things are like their company stuff that like internal, you're like, yeah, we're going to talk about like company values today. Like, look at our, and it says the green that symbolizes nature, health, optimism, and growth. Like 90%, I'm sorry, I should change that. 99% of PDGA members don't look at that logo and go, oh yes, the green symbolizing my health, right? Like,
yeah.
It's a great internal thing. It's a great branding thing that they're going to talk about and they're going to put in their ads and such. But I think I agree. I think that's a really good comment. I do think the logo is very clean.
It is very clean.
I've seen it on like and they've talked about it and highlighted it, but you get some PDGA members who are wearing that merch, like Danny Voss or other players. I can't remember the other ones who came on the camera. I don't know if Danny Voss came on the camera. Sorry, Danny, good friend of the pod, comes on and chats with us about the PDGA. But there are people who are on coverage who are wearing that new logo, and it looks professional, and that's what I really do like. But I do see your point that if you're not in it, do you know what it means? So.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, like every other, you know, big league logo that I'm thinking of has some sort of identifier. Like the NFL has a football on it. Yep. NBA has a basketball player. WNBA has a basketball player.
Yep.
Major League Baseball has the hitter. Yeah. PGA has the golfer. I mean, you know, they all have something. MLS is just basically just a soccer ball.
Hold on. NHL is not an obvious hockey logo.
Is it not?
It's a shield that's just the black and silver with the NHL letters across it.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So NHL is not obvious, but I see your point. Like, no one, very few people see the NHL logo and go NHL. Like, never heard of that.
Right. They're also all a little bit bigger than than disc golf is at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So good point there. I'm glad you remember. Like, I think it's something exciting. It is the first rebranding the PDGA has done since 1997. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's been a while, but nice rebrand. So we're gonna get to some mail. We've got some really good mail that we want to hit today. I'm going to start us off. We got an email and I think this is the reason I kind of felt to do the mailbag today. We had an email come from, and this comes from a friend from Switzerland, who talks a little bit about, and we covered this on the pod. Man, I don't even remember. I think it was last year, maybe last year, I think is what it was. At Switzerland, there was a tournament, PDGA sanctioned, and it falls underneath the governing body of like Swiss sports, which is the WADA. And because it's under the WADA, the members of the WADA showed up and drug tested the lead card. And one player resigned due to not passing this drug test. And he was suspended for 2 years in sanctioned tournament under WADA. This player is Tony Farrow, who this emailer said has been kind of running his own tournament series to help grow the sport in Switzerland. And this year is planning on playing about 80% of the Disc Golf Pro Tour because it is not sanctioned by WADA. And he said that we all need to watch for Tony Farrow because he's what he says considers to be the best player in Switzerland. So I think a little bit more to that story that I know we covered about a year ago. But the big question he asks, or points that he makes, and Dan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. He says, in his opinion, if the sport wants to be more professional, sooner or later, the drug policy will also be implemented at the Disc Golf Pro Tour level as well. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Now, I assume this is like performance enhancing drugs is the question here. The email from our friend said that it was due to THC is the reason why he withdrew from that tournament. And was suspended for 2 years?
Yes, that is what this email says from our friend in Switzerland, who asked to be referred to as our friend from Switzerland.
I don't know what to say about this one, really. Listen, I think it's unprofessional for a player, if they are seen on the course, if they're on a broadcast, if they're at a Pro Tour event or at a major, if you see them consuming drugs. I think that's definitely unprofessional. The league will not want that. It's just a bad, unprofessional look especially for a sport that, I think in a lot of people's perceptions, and Ultimate would have this too, as like a hippie sport.
Sure.
And not taken seriously at a professional level, which is obviously not true. I think drug testing of this kind, and maybe this is a little too political for the show, is ridiculous. It's not performance enhancing in any way. If you do it in your own time, all the power to you, in my opinion. It's been shown to have like health benefits in terms of stress and helping people sleep and, people not feeling pain. And it is relatively pretty harmless. I would be more interested to see, like, if we ever get to a point where we need to start drug testing for performance enhancing drugs. I don't really know how much performance enhancing drugs would help in disc golf, other than maybe like, being able to help you train a little bit harder and recover better and faster.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, do you have different thoughts on this, Josh?
No, I don't necessarily. I just think it's interesting because, like you mentioned, in terms of like what level of drug testing, I think this was kind of a big headline both in the United States as well, when Sha'Carri Richardson, the 100-meter athlete, was also banned and had a title stripped from her due to marijuana being considered a performance under the banned substance list. So yeah. I think that a lot of sports are reckoning with this, especially as the legalization of like marijuana's coming out, and so recreational use is increasing. I just think it was an interesting update to our story, and that had details that we had not received yet. So that comes from our friend from Switzerland, but he says that Tony Farrow is a guy that we definitely need to watch for, who is a strong player. So.
All right, yeah, let's get some Swiss players. That's one thing that I really want to see from disc golf take the next level. Let's get more players from more places being competitive more frequently. Yeah. Okay, our next mailbag question is submitted by David. He says, I was surprised by all the discussion about Simon's terrible showing, possible injury, and my assessment that he will not win an Elite Series or Major this year. Then neither of you took up discussing whether Eagle McMahon will be able to make a comeback this season with limited use of his forehand and perhaps a periodic lefty backhand. You did discuss his run of bogeys, very un-Eagle-like, but no overreactions based on his showing at LVC after winning Goat Hill seemed amiss. Will Eagle win an Elite DGPT or Major this year? Now that the season is off and running, it seems a valid question, particularly as it relates to Simon's situation and bouncing back from serious elbow issues and modifying one's game to allow for continued play and avoiding further damage or injury.
Man, I think the biggest reason, look, I am the first one who says, like, I qualify every statement about Eagle this season with if he can stay healthy, right? I'm the first one to do that. But there are two reasons why I don't think I'm as worried about it, and as worried as I am about Simon. Well, three reasons, actually. Number one, we had reports from people who were emailing in or messaging in on Discord who saying Simon was kind of like favoring his elbow in that final round. So we have people telling us that Simon's is an injury thing. I did not hear the same things about Eagle. Number two is that the win at Goat Hill, as well as when he was throwing, like, didn't make me seem like he was hindered by injury. And so, like, the win at Goat Hill really, like, encourages me in the fact that he can still throw far, because throwing far at Goat Hill is like all that tournament is about. And then number three is, like, we know why Eagle didn't win this weekend, and it was a subpar putting performance. And that just doesn't, like, putting performance doesn't scream injury to me. I could be wrong. I think there still is some questions around the long-term durability of the season, right? But this event in particular did not give me kind of the pause that that maybe David thinks that there should have been.
Yeah, I think the difference too is that Simon's was like, we know where Eagle is at, right? We know. I think we all, like, have expressed our reservations. As Josh said, anytime you talk about Eagle, you say like if he can stay healthy.
Right.
So I think we kind of like that. Just kind of at this point goes without saying. Like like we know Eagle has his health stuff at this point. It didn't seem to flare up at all at LVC, which I think is why we didn't talk about it. I think the Simon thing is more alarming because it felt to most people like he was beyond that. Right? Like, when's the last time we were concerned about his elbow? I mean, I think you're always probably at this point in his career, like, have, probably in the back in your mind, but like, he seemed pretty healthy last year. So I think the alarm there was that like, oh no, the elbow is a problem again all of a sudden, when we didn't expect it. And yeah, I mean, I think I did say this in the pod, like if we had seen, or if I didn't, I should have, I certainly was thinking like if we saw Eagle having, a physical reaction, like if we saw him grabbing his shoulder or whatever, then yeah, I think that is a bigger talking point. I think that's the difference, not like, any kind of expectation difference or holding either to a higher standard or anything like that.
David also calls me out for a mulligan. Dan, you correctly identified the species of goose by their name, Canada geese. Yeah. I called it a Canadian goose or Canadian geese. That is incorrect. As David notes, they do not have a passport and therefore are not granted nationality status as citizens of Canada. He asks me to please take note in the future, as we do not wish to start an international scandal and have our brothers, sisters, and waterfowl from the north of the border being accused of bad faith for disc golf interference in competition. So, tongue in cheek, thank you for the correction. I actually never would have known that. I had no idea that I was supposed to call it a Canada geese.
It is a
Canada geese.
It is a Canada goose. Yeah, I thought about correcting you in the moment, but I thought it maybe would have been a little overly pedantic, especially as my first, our first episode together. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty common one. But yeah, I guess I never really thought about the reason for it, and which David lays out in I guess pretty good detail.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a Canada goose. Rather than Canadian
Dan,
goose.
Is David your pseudonym? Did you write in so that you could harass me about this while not seeing me?
No. I have been called David so many times in my life. People have like met me once. Like, is it David? I would absolutely never use David as a pseudonym. For that
okay. All right. Next email. This comes from Eric. And I think this is a really good question that I want to hear a little bit. And the reason I picked this one for this show, Dan, is because I want to hear a little bit about your side as a fan and not quite as involved in the disc golf media side. Mm-hmm. He wants to know our opinion on major bids and tournament selection year process. This year, Nate Heinold is the TD for Champions Cup, along with Ledgestone. And he's been an advocate for TDs being able to take home money for running events, which Eric notes he appreciates and agrees with, as do I. But he says, as the president of the PDGA board, doesn't it seem like a conflict of interest for him to be running Champions Cup, a PDGA major that he will, I assume, pocket some cash from? Similarly, he'll be the TD for Worlds in 2024 at Paul Macbeth's course, where he'll get to sell Ledgestone branded Paul Macbeth World Champion discs. His question is this just are we just at a point in the sport where we just need whoever to get majors who will run them, and so we need to have it go? Or is this something that we should be concerned about?
Well, this is not something I really thought about. But yeah, it does seem like a bit of a conflict of interest that you can, kind of direct events towards your own business interests. This is something like that Ultimate Frisbee. I have, a lot more years of covering Ultimate Frisbee very close.
Great, yeah.
Has some issues with as well. Like the people who host tournaments are often, the same people over and over and over again. And there aren't people that the major governing organizations just pay or hire full time to run those events. I don't know that I have a strong opinion about it other than, I think it would be nice. Kind of like I said, let's get more players from more places. Let's get more tournaments in more different places,
Yeah.
That's what I would like to see. Make it a more truly international game. And I know that's not a new take. I think people have been calling for the European Worlds for a long time. But yeah, anything that can make that happen sooner, I am in favor of. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, two things on this. I think number one is, and we talk about this often, it's hard to get major bids these days because the publicity and oftentimes negative publicity you get if it goes poorly, it's a ton of extra hours. I don't know how much, and this is the part that I know Nate Heinold has advocated for more money for tournament directors, which I completely agree with, but I don't know how much he actually makes from these events. what I would think, and this may be this is not a point where it makes me say, oh, stop Nate Heinold from running events, because I think he is a good tournament director who runs some of the highest profile and most complex events in terms of scale that I think bring a lot of value to both those events as well as the PDGA board. But I think this is an opportunity where, and maybe this exists and I'm just ill-informed, but I would love to see a report that if a tournament director ever brings home any money, that they are required to publish in an email how much went to the purse, where that money came from, and where that money then went. And because then I think it's a very accountable salary, right? It's transparent, it's clear, and it can be according to some set of standards, whether community otherwise, that we agree with. Remember, OTB, the 1,000 Rated Productions, I think, is the company that they run OTB under, have talked about how they want this to be a spectator event designed around making money, that they want it to bring people and have vendors and to make a profit from running this event in a few years. I think lots more events should go that way because they upgrade the level of spectator experience. I just want to know then, like, if it is a part and tied to like PDGA sanctioning, what are the money requirements around it? How much would they be able to take? What is it relative to entries? Where do sponsorship monies go? I think that this is in the interest of the both Disc Golf Pro Tour as well as the PDGA to clarify in this world of the increased professionalization as well as sponsorships of the sport.
I have a follow-up question for you, Josh.
Okay.
Do you think it's tenable that the highest level of disc golf, both the Pro Tour and majors, continue to be run by, different individuals that aren't actually, employees of said organizations? Or do you think we're headed more towards where there's a few people who are, the TDs that are actually running these events, weekend after weekend?
I think as long as the sport continues to depend on volunteer groups, because it's not just like the tournament director, right? It's the fact that you need to mobilize the club and that you're getting city buy-in and the level of buy-in that it takes right now to run that kind of event just on the course infrastructure is so great. I think it would be very difficult for the Pro Tour to say, here is our designated TD or our 3 designated TDs who just leapfrog each other in running events, because you really do still need the buy-in of the club. Is there a world in which the Disc Golf Pro Tour has an entire staff of like course workers and like arborists and line painters who like show up and prep the course in advance? That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. But I think you still are going to depend on the local ground support who are going to the city and saying, look, we want to come here for our tournament and we need your approval. And here are the things we want to do with the course and the permits that we're going to need. And that requires a level of local buy-in that I think we are a long ways out from getting away from.
Yeah, that's probably true. I do think that it is achievable, though, if the Pro Tour continues to grow at the level that we've seen the last couple of years. So that feels to me like kind of the next big step of professionalization. That you're moving away from the dependence on volunteer work, and you can have a more centrally controlled expectations and work for everything like that.
Yeah, great point. All right, Dan, what's next on the emails?
All right, next question comes from Frank. The cost of DGN and the PDGA discount is a great deal, but for me, it's still not a good value for me because of competition. The main competitor for me is the game itself. When the Disc Golf Network is on, I'm usually playing. It's tough to buy a subscription, to be for a subscription. That on the off chance I won't be playing or doing things like yard work, having a cookout, etc. All those things you do in summer weekends in the Midwest.
I've heard this comment a lot, and we actually got some emails as well, because Charlie and I talked about that we still feel like the Disc Golf Network is a great value. And this comes from like Charlie's background of knowing how much it costs to run live streaming, because he does for the ultimate side of Ultiworld. I think that DGN really benefits from one thing in particular. And now I will say, if I have a tournament the weekend of another tournament, I don't watch much. I'll watch Jomez and Central Coast to catch up. Like I will watch post-produced in that case, but Disc Golf Network is the kind of thing that I turn on and then I do dishes and I do some, work around the house. And, when it's early rounds, I may throw in an earbud and just listen and continue to do different things. And so I don't feel like I have to sit down and just watch the TV for the full 6 hours or 5 hours or however long for both broadcasts. I pop in and out. I do things while I'm watching. I just have it on in the background. And that to me is enough value that by the time Sunday rolls around, it's back nine and I'm like, heck yeah, I'm watching. And I sit down and watch the back nine, minute to minute in that subscription. But that's personally how I consume Disc Golf Network and why it still feels like it's a good deal and a good value for me.
This is the thing about value, right, Josh? Just because something is you can find something that's on an incredible sale.
Uh-huh.
But if you're never going to use it or never eat it or whatever it is, you should not buy it, no matter how good of a deal it is, right?
It's a good point.
Right? So, if you are the kind of person like Frank here who is basically just never going to watch live disc golf, then yeah, it doesn't make sense to get the subscription. But if you're the kind of person who wants to watch live disc golf, you are going to have that chunk of time, whether it's actively watching or background watching. I'm at the point where I don't even I put post produced on in the disc golf shop all the time. We have a TV in there and it's always on disc golf. So I put it a lot on there. That is the only way I consume post produced disc golf anymore. If I'm not watching it live, I'm not that invested. Live sports to me are just so much that's the appeal of sports. Yeah. Is that you don't know what's going to happen next. And I think I remember Charlie saying this last year that I am going to check live scores on UDisc when the round is happening. I'm not going to wait till post produced. But yeah, it's if you're like Frank and you're going to prioritize the other things, that's totally fine. Everyone has their own priorities and enjoys, their weekends their own way. Frank should not get the Disc Golf Network. It is not a good value for him.
I think the point that you make though is that no price point is it really value for Frank though if he's not going to watch it, right? Exactly. He should just buy the month of Worlds and watch those tournaments and Worlds and then be happy with that month, right? And or there's a majors package that he can buy and then maybe he'll just want to watch the majors. But I think it's a good point. My last email that I want to hit is a little bit of a it's not the heaviest topic, but I love this because I'm a hockey fan. Scott says, in response to our question, I said, and I made the call to listeners, are there any athletes who really hit their success and their fame in their older age? And his example was Tim Thomas, the former Boston Bruins goaltender. He says this be his best bet. He won the Conn Smythe, the Vezina Trophy, and the Stanley Cup all after the age of 30 and was just a journeyman goaltender before getting the starting job for the Bruins. I think that this is exactly the example I was looking for. Scott, you hit the nail on the head. I knew a listener would come through. Thanks for delivering, Scott. I'm a big hockey fan, so I really appreciate that it was in hockey.
All right, let me save you then before you get the mulligan again. The mulligan again. It's the Conn Smythe Award.
You're right, and I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that, and it's so funny. You know what's really funny? In the email from Scott, he had a typo on the Vezina Award, so I went and looked up the pronunciation because I was
Vezina.
Yeah. And I was like, I got to make sure I get this right. And I listened to some award videos. Okay, I do say it correctly. You're right. It's the Conn Smythe Award. My goodness.
It's
and
okay.
I just said I was a hockey fan. I'm embarrassing.
So is Owen Scoggins the Tim Thomas of the PDGA?
No, we say that it's largely Kristen Tatar, right? Who won a major, but her real GOAT season, right? Her historic season was after the age of 30. And we were
so I didn't know that she was that old, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So this was inspired by Kristen Tatar because if Kristen does what she did last season, and we don't have any reason to think she couldn't, she becomes one of the greatest FPO players that we are talking about. Yeah. And it's after the age of 30. And I was when has that ever happened? Owen Scoggins is an interesting point, but it doesn't have quite the success of Kristen, I think so.
I think the interesting question is, can Kristen happen again in the future? Or are we getting to the point where you're seeing it more in MPO than FPO at this point, but I think it's, inevitable it swings to FPO too, where just players are getting younger and younger and hitting that pro level at a younger age. I wonder if Kristen is kind of the last of her kind in that way.
I would imagine that it's largely players, like if you can using other sports analogies, right? If it's like Paul Macbeth is in his early 30s. Is it the case of Paul Macbeth where you get people who are good at 15 and 16 and then just play really well for 15 years, right?
Right.
Tom Brady is like the example, I think the quintessential example, or like the LeBron James of the world. I don't think we're like, that's why I struggled to find an example of somebody who got really good after they were 30, and Kristen's our example. But I think Kristen also suffers from not being able to play in the US as much. And so as the tour professionalized and earned more money, she was able to come over. If she did this in 2019, like imagine if the Pro Tour was like it is today in 2019. I think she won her major in 2018, but I might be wrong about that. So the year after she won her first major, I'd be curious to know if do we have breakout Kristen Tatar when she's 27 or 28?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of factors there for sure. That's such an interesting conversation that I would love to talk more about, but I feel like for the sake of the length of the podcast, we should move on to the last email here from Sam K. Thought it might be interesting to track Jomez viewership this year since they're no longer airing the final round on YouTube for free, and will push more people to subscribe to DGN. So,
Dan, I'm actually going to flip this question right back on you. Because I know you said on Tuesday that you used to just watch the free live coverage available on YouTube, because that's what you wanted to watch anyway, right? You check UDisc until final day. Is this going to push you to post-produced? Is this going to push you to DGN? Or is this going to push you to neither by them removing final round?
This is an unfair question to ask me because I will say I watched every round. No, I didn't watch every second of every round, but I watched at least parts of every round over the weekend because I wanted to be prepared for this podcast.
Great.
As a result of that, I now have Disc Golf Network for the year. Which I think Charlie said he's going to lord over me for the rest of the year to do more Ultra World Disc Golf content. So we'll see how that goes for me.
Perfect.
So I will certainly be watching as much live as possible this year. I would say that it would have pushed me to be more likely to subscribe for the Disc Golf Network rather than going back to post-produced, if that were not the case for me. I don't know that I would have pulled the trigger. For me, it might have been I would pull the trigger, for the big events for just a month at a time. I don't really want to spend that much money to watch, to have it I'm going to now that I have it, of course.
Sure.
But yeah, I just once you watch live disc golf, it's really difficult to go back to watching not live. It just is really, really difficult.
I'm curious to know how many people are if Disc Golf Network was $3 a month instead of $6 a month for me as a PDGA member, I would do it. And I would watch it regularly. I feel like most of the people who are this is too much for me, or, and the value isn't worth it, also don't feel like it's typically a time commitment to, as Frank pointed out, to watching live disc golf. And so I think that a lot of people, and I agree, that are in the YouTube watched final round free and live are probably more likely to say, you know what, I like live disc golf. I didn't have any reason to pay for it because they gave me the good stuff for free. But now that I don't have it for free, I'm probably going to pony up because I enjoy live disc golf. I'm curious to know if there are people who were I used to watch it live on YouTube, and I love live disc golf, but just I refuse to pay $6 a month. That is not worth it to me, even though I love it and I love DGN. That's an email I have not heard yet or read yet, and I would be interested to see if I get one after this kind of segment, because I think I concur with you that more people, I think you're in the majority, that more people are going to get pushed to live than are going to get pushed back to Jomez.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about, because you could see in the top left corner during the live broadcast how many people were viewing. And I really wanted to know what the comparison was for last year, but it would be impossible to know, right? Because even though people could have watched it on Disc Golf Network, I'm sure there are a lot of people who were paying for Disc Golf Network who are watching the final round on YouTube instead for a whole host of different reasons.
Because YouTube's better than Vimeo.
Yes. Yeah. That's the one. But yeah, I really am so curious how this does go for the Disc Golf Network. like when I first heard the news, I definitely was concerned. Like, oh, they made this jump too early. They they're still at the very much of a growing phase as a sport and as a league, and that limiting that access will hurt them in the long term more than is worth right now. So I don't know that will be true. That was just like, a concern that I would have. But yeah, so I am very, very curious to see how the numbers go for them this year, and how many more people are going to post-produced versus ponying up for the live.
Yeah. I know that we usually get DGN viewership numbers for big tournaments, so we'll make sure to get those. But that ends it for our mailbag. And Dan, thank you for coming on the show. It has been a pleasure to have you this week. You're rocking the Drafted sweatshirt. Remember, Dan, the host of the Drafted podcast, you can get it anywhere where you're listening to this podcast. Dan, what's the release schedule going to be like for Drafted this year?
So we are just about to start up our first. We release every Tuesday. So it'll be the first Tuesday of March, which I think will be like the 7th or 8th. So next Tuesday, and then we will try our best. Now, Preston and I aren't like on a as professional a schedule as Charlie and Josh. So there are definitely times like where we just can't get an episode out. But yeah, we try to get it out every Tuesday. From the start of March, we do brackets for March Madness, and then pivot over into drafts through the summer. So that is our stretch. Also, if you want more of me though, personal plug, I also stream on Twitch. Don't do much sports stuff, admittedly, but still have a fun time over there. I am DAP_sauce on Twitch. If you want to check me out over there, I would super appreciate that too.
All right, there we go. Check out Drafted. Check out Twitch. Dan, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope to have you in the future. I'm sure we'll be able to find more things to draft over here on the Upshot. And otherwise, though, thank you so much for joining us. Charlie should be back with us next week. And for all the subscribers, thank you so much. If you don't have a subscription yet, you're missing out. You miss out on the Discord, the Rapid Reacts. It's a great time in the Discord. You can go and subscribe for less than $4 a month. Until next time, though, have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday.